Hello, and welcome to our webinar, Exploring Ready-to-Use Content in the ArcGIS Living Atlas. My name is Scott Ward. My colleagues Bonnie Stair, Ben Knott, and I will be your hosts. First, I'd like to cover some administrative details. You'll be able to ask questions through the questions module, and we will answer those at the end of the webinar. The recording for this will be posted early next week if you'd like to review it in the future. With that, we can get started, and I will hand this off to Ben.
Thank you, Scott. Hello and welcome everyone to the ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World. In introduction, my name is Ben Knott. I'm an account manager at Esri. I'll be starting off the webinar and we'll hand things over to my colleague Bonnie Stair, a solution engineer on the national government team, who will introduce herself and take a deeper dive into the content. We'll both join you for questions and answers after the presentation, so please enter your questions and comments in the chat window at any time and we'll pick them up later. So let's begin. ArcGIS includes a collection of curated, ready-to-use content in the form of basemaps, layers, maps, apps, and more. That collection is the ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World. It's the foremost collection of worldwide geographic information from Esri and the global GIS community. This community includes all types of organizations, from federal, state, county, and city governments, environmental groups, universities, private companies, and more. Anyone can contribute, and throughout this presentation, we'd like for you to consider how your organization might benefit from contributing to the Living Atlas. It's very much a Living Atlas. Indeed, some of the content is live. All of it is curated, authoritative, and continually updated. The Living Atlas content includes content from many different organizations. Esri creates and publishes much of the content in the Living Atlas. Additionally, the Living Atlas includes content from Esri partners such as Nearmap, which provides high-resolution imagery, and Waze for real-time traffic monitoring. Increasingly, content in the Living Atlas is being published by authoritative organizations in the Esri user community, such as NOAA with real-time weather data, and their partnership with the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management in the Marine Cadastre. Finally, one very notable addition this year is the COVID-19 dashboard from Johns Hopkins, which tracks confirmed cases around the world and has nearly 2 billion views this year. Living Atlas content is readily available throughout the ArcGIS platform. This content is available to support the information products that you develop with ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Enterprise, ArcGIS Pro, or you can simply search and explore the Living Atlas website. So now, before I turn it over to my colleague Bonnie, we'd like to pause and ask how you typically consume Living Atlas data, if at all, with this poll question. So it looks like most folks are using ArcGIS Online, ArcGIS Pro, which is to be expected, and to some degree Enterprise, which Bonnie will touch on here shortly. So with that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Bonnie Stair, to take it away.
All right. Thanks very much, Ben, and thank you all for participating in that poll. As Ben said, I'm a solution engineer on Esri's national government team, and I'm going to start off by taking you through a tour of the content within Living Atlas. So we take the entire portfolio of Living Atlas content and divide it up into these 7 overarching categories, and these are further divided into subcategories, and it's really just to help you find what you're looking for, right? Make it easier to filter through everything that's there. And so we're going to walk through each of these 7, the trending, base maps, imagery, boundaries, people, infrastructure, and environment. And as we look at some of this content, you'll see some of it does overlap, right? Things can be in multiple different categories. There might be trending content that is also environmental, for example. But we'll take a deeper dive into each one. And we're going to start by talking about the environment category. And this category includes characteristics of our world's land and oceans, such as elevation and bathymetry, soils and geology, energy resources, habitat and species, land cover, weather and climate, and it includes a lot of the live feeds that are used in disaster preparedness and response. Some notable contributions from the national government user community include a lot of the great weather layers that NOAA provides, as well as things like marine protected areas. The Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, as Ben mentioned, contributes a lot around marine cadastre. EPA has shared information on air quality and non-attainment areas as well. In terms of elevation, just a few things to note. We do use the best public and community data from sources such as USGS, NASA, NGA, et cetera, as well as commercial sources to help provide even more detail down to under less than a meter in resolution. And this data is available for you to use in your analysis as well. So it's not just for visualization. You can incorporate it into analysis. It has layers for terrain, topobathymetry, slope, aspect, and hillshade. And we also have DEMs for both the Arctic and Antarctic. Next category is infrastructure. So this is information about world traffic, transportation networks, structures and utilities, as well as agricultural layers, which you might not think of as infrastructure, but we also incorporate other types of government boundary layers. The DHS Homeland Infrastructure Foundation Level Database, or HIFLD, is some of the data that you'll see within this category, things like roads and railroads and bridges, power plants and oil refineries, communications data like cell towers, fire stations, hospitals, schools, etc. In terms of agriculture, there's things like harvested areas for different types of crops, which might be useful. And as I mentioned, federal agency administrative areas are also found here. The next category is people. So this has over 50 ready-to-use maps of demographics and lifestyle data. And we actually have more variables available for enrichment through our analysis services. And but in terms of the visual layers that we've created, there's about 50 of them there. And this includes data from the decennial census, which Esri demographers also make estimates and predictions off of, the American Community Survey, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Consumer Expenditure Survey, as well as third-party data sources for things like market potential and business information as well. And we provide that foundation data, those basic demographics for over 130 countries. For that American Community Survey data, we actually provide two different versions of that data. Some people want to work with the data mapped to just the boundary level, so polygon data, but others might want to work with it as centroids, depending on the type of visualization they want to make. So we actually provide both flavors in this category. An example of a federal user who's contributed here is the CDC. So they have their data on social vulnerability, as well as other types of health data like the hospitalization rates that you can see here in the screenshot. Moving on to boundaries, as the name implies, these are just typical type of administrative boundaries for various levels and within different countries. There's also environmental boundaries and geometric boundaries. So as I mentioned, along with the demographic data, we have over 130 countries of boundaries that we get from commercial sources like Michael Bauer Research. And we supplement that with additional layers from other local authoritative sources. So you might see, for example, Esri distributors contributing content here. And these layers have been optimized for analysis because so often we want to do mapping and analyzing data, to these different administrative boundary levels. So they are optimized for that analysis process. And with that, sometimes you want to use just a more regular grid of boundaries. So we do provide geometric boundaries like hex bins for you to do analysis with as well. Next up is imagery, probably one of the most popular categories. This includes basemap imagery, multispectral, temporal, and event imagery. Specifically here, probably the most popular offering is our World Imagery Basemap. This we've been updating with Maxar imagery, formerly Digital Globe. That's been going on for a number of years. And then we also update it with contributions from the GIS community from our Community Maps program. And so that includes, national, provincial, and local sources that all share their data into this community map. And it, provides the most recent imagery, but we also do provide a clarity version. So one that is more cloud-free. It may not be the most recent, but at least it's more visible, more cloud-free. And there's also a historical archive that I'll talk about through one of our custom apps that you can access. In terms of the multispectral data, we have the NAPE, the USDA NAPE imagery, that 4-band imagery with 1 meter or better resolution for the US. Landsat 8 global with 15-meter resolution. That's updated daily with a new scene every 16 days. And newer offering is Sentinel-2, also global with 10-meter resolution, and also updated daily with revisits every 5 to 7 days. Moving on to Basemaps. So these are fundamental to the web maps that people are building within the ArcGIS platform, and built from the commercial, open source, and community authoritative data providers, similar to the imagery base map that we already talked about. And basically, this is a way to provide that data and present it in multiple cartographic styles that help emphasize different views of our world. And the newest generation of these base maps is based on the vector tile format. These are updated every 3 weeks and localized in about 25 languages. We have these component layers. We can break these into base layers and reference overlays. And in beta right now is a new places data set that will be included in a base map. This is data provided by our partner SafeGraph. And we'll also incorporate that data into search and routing, so you can look up points of interest in your maps. We also include OpenStreetMap as one of our vector-based map layers, and we provide some of those OpenStreetMap data through feature layers as well. So just a note on these vector-based maps. Some of you may be familiar with our more traditional offering, which was the raster base maps. But we really want to encourage you to think about moving over, if you haven't already, to primarily using the vector base maps. There's many more ready to use styles available. We have about 20 core styles that we've created, but there's many more creative styles out there as well. The maps are customizable by users and developers, so you can create your own styles. One important use case here is to be able to change the treatment of disputed places around the globe, depending on what your organization wants to do. The display of these vector-based maps is much better on high-resolution displays, so they just come across more crisply on our more modern devices. There's better support for disconnected use. First, we can build the tile cache much faster, so we can keep the data fresher. And it is a smaller cache, so we can store larger areas on those small mobile devices. It's more interactive. We can rotate our vector-based maps, so we don't always have to be pointed at true north. And we can support other map projections with vector tiles, so we can do client-side reprojection of those tiles. So the other reason you'll want to be moving towards vector-based maps is that we are transitioning away from those raster-based maps. We're moving them into mature support. We started doing this last year and will continue through 2021. The layers will still continue to be hosted by Esri. They'll still work, but we will no longer be actively updating those raster-based maps. So in order to get the latest data, you'll want to move over to the vector-based maps. So the more popular base maps, such as world topography and streets, those will be maintained. Those will be sort of the last ones to translate over into mature support. And there will be a few that we can't move off the raster format, like world imagery, hillshade, and the ocean base. Those will be maintained indefinitely because they don't work in the vector tile format. But just a note, we want to make sure everyone's aware that this change is happening, and want to encourage you to move over to vector-based maps in your web maps. All right, the next category is trending. So these are basically new and noteworthy additions to the Living Atlas. And mostly reflect current events, what's going on around the world. So you'll see a lot of the traditional type of natural disaster layers here, like hurricanes and wildfires. And then obviously this year with COVID, we've had a ton of contributions to the Living Atlas around that data. Some really exciting layers have been made available. So unfortunately, it's still a current event, so we still have those layers here in the trending category. Lastly, I wanted to talk about analysis services. Now, this isn't officially a category under the Living Atlas, but we often talk about these in the same breath as the Living Atlas content because they're powered by a lot of the data coming from the Living Atlas and the Community Maps program and things like that. So tools like geocoding and routing and network analysis that make use of the street network, geo-enrichment, making use of the demographic information, as well as hydrology analysis that uses that elevation data. It can also be used for things like view sheds. So that data is being incorporated, not just as visualizations, but also powering your analysis within the WebGIS environment. And these are exposed through that ArcGIS Online and optionally ArcGIS Enterprise map tools or the map viewer tools. You can also access them in ArcGIS Pro, or if you're a developer, they're available through the REST API. All right, so we're gonna take a look at how we access this content. So we polled you guys to see how you're accessing it today. Maybe if you haven't tried one of these other ways, you can now get familiar with how that's accessed through these different parts of the ArcGIS platform. So let me go ahead and switch over. All right, so I'm gonna start by talking about the Living Atlas website. I'm gonna go over to the Home tab just to start off. So this should be a fairly easy URL to remember, livingatlas.arcgis.com. If you've never gone here, this is a great place to start to get familiar with the entire portfolio of content. Here on the Home tab, it'll also highlight what's new. So if there's been new additions, new applications, new layers that have been submitted, this is a great place to keep up to date with that. Also, feel free to read the blog whenever there's new interesting announcements or maybe things that you're not familiar with. The blog is a great place to get up to speed with that. But if you're just starting out and getting familiar with the Living Atlas, this Browse tab is a great place to start. And this displays those 7 categories that I just talked about. And it provides other types of filters, right? So I can filter by content type or region, for example. I can also favorite items once I'm signed into this website with my identity and my ArcGIS Online organization. I can mark things as favorites if I want to be able to get back to them easily. So if I filter, we'll show what some of these filters look like. I can click on a category. I can choose one of the particular subcategories and see just the content meeting that criteria. And I also want to point out some of the other flags you'll see under here. We mark things that have been marked by their organization as authoritative. We also will note when something is subscriber content, meaning it requires an ArcGIS Online subscription in order to access it, or if it's premium content. So this is a particular layer that includes content that consumes credits, usually because it's coming from some third-party data source. So that's all noted here, so you'll always be able to see what type of layer you're accessing. All right, so I'm going to clear my search. Here, go back to all. And I'm just going to type in a keyword to look up a layer that I'm interested in viewing. So I'm going to look for tornado tracks. I get some results here. And again, since I'm signed into this website, one of the options I have is to go ahead and open one of these layers right within my map viewer. So this will take me over to ArcGIS Online into that map viewer and will show me that data. So just that quickly, I can get started building a map around this. One of the things I might want to do is change my base map. So again, a lot of the base maps that are available in the Living Atlas are automatically, kind of configured within this map viewer that, you can bring in your own content as well, but the default Esri maps are here too. So I'm going to switch to the light gray base map because I kind of want to keep the focus on my tornado tracks. But I do want to highlight, I wish this would show me the urban areas a little bit more. So one of the things that I can do with my base map is actually change its style. And this is going to launch me into a editor. Oops, urban. Save that style. And this brings me into one of our custom apps that works with the Living Atlas content, particularly these vector base maps. So this is our vector tile style editor. And this lets me configure and customize, the appearance of this vector tile base map. So as we mentioned, this is one of the benefits of using the vector tiles over rasters, is because I can configure the look and feel of this however I want. So we've got some kind of quick editing layers queued up here, but I can dive into each one. And I'm going to look at populated places and the urban areas. And I can, choose a zoom level where I want this color to turn on and off. I'm just going to leave the defaults for now and just change my color a little bit to be sort of a light purple, something like that. I'll say done. I save that style, and this will save this as an item within my content in ArcGIS Online. And now when I'm taken back into my map viewer, I now have that updated base map where my urban areas are more highlighted here in this light purple color. Now, if I want to add any more information to this map, I want to, look at those Living Atlas layers again. I don't have to go back to the Living Atlas website. They are available right here within my map viewer. So if I go to the Add dropdown, I can browse Living Atlas layers. And I have those same filtering capabilities in terms of the categories, the regions, maybe the item type. So I can, again, narrow down on what I'm interested in. Maybe I want to add some infrastructure layers. I'll look for cell towers and add this in. So now I've added some other infrastructure layers to help build out my information product, right? So those are a couple ways that we interact with the Living Atlas layers within ArcGIS Online. One last way is by going to the Content tab of the main ArcGIS Online interface. By default, you're taken to your own content, but there's a Living Atlas category over here on the far right. And this, again, lets you search, filter through all of these different items. So those are, just a few of the ways that you interact with it within the ArcGIS Online interface. Going back to the Living Atlas website, one of the other tabs that we have here is called Apps. So in addition to the, individual item listings, we have a series of sort of customized apps that help us explore and use this content from the Living Atlas. So these are easy to use. They help unlock that potential of everything that's been contributed. So these leverage the, leveraging the data in really interesting ways. They let us even in some cases extract and create our own maps, like we saw with the vector tile editor. I could click on any one of these to get more details and then optionally view that application. So we obviously don't have time to dive into all of these, but there were just a couple that I wanted to highlight. One is this World Imagery Wayback app. So I've already got that open over here. So as I mentioned, we have the World Imagery base map that we're continually updating, but we do hold on to that historical imagery and make it available through this Wayback application. So this lets me peruse that digital archive with over 80 versions of world imagery going back over 6 years. And so every 3 weeks, as we refresh the live service, we add to this repository. And we can explore this content through both a timeline view, if I scroll along the top here, and we also have it listed below in that format. And I can optionally turn on this checkbox that I only list and show in my timeline the scenes that have local changes within this particular area. I'm going to zoom in around Denver. Ben is from Denver, so I'm picking on that area. There's an area here nearby the airport that's seen some development if we're looking at the most recent scene. But if I hover over back in 2014, there wasn't this neighborhood currently built out. So I can, scan through each of these to see that progress over time and how that imagery has changed. For each of these scenes, I can actually add them to a queue. So if I just check this little cloud icon next to it, it puts it into my queue, and then I can take these items and add them into a new web map. So this will create a new web map in my content, and I'll go ahead and open it, and it'll bring those two different versions of the imagery into my web map that I can then again build some other information product off of, perhaps a swipe app that compares them side by side. Notice also it comes along with metadata. So for any of these scenes, I can click and pull up the metadata about when that scene was captured, the source, the resolution, etc. All right. So the next sort of special app, custom app that I wanted to highlight is our Esri Maps for Public Policy. And this is a kind of a collection or subset of a lot of those layers that you'd find in the Living Atlas that are designed to be really expressive maps that reveal important community facts and show the need for action or a need to intervene. Many of these are demographic focused. So for example, the one we're looking at here is people in households with no internet access. So this is one of those American Community Survey variables. I can click on any one of these, of course, and get a well-configured pop-up. And then, you know, in addition to those typical demographic variables, we're expanding that collection. Again, some of the newer content around COVID is available here and how that's affecting populations. So this is a visualization that we've called up and down COVID-19 trends, showing, you know, where the cases are going, how they're trending. Are they trending up or trending down? How long has that trend been going on? So we can see what's going on in the upper Midwest right now. But in addition to demographic information, we're also bringing in more and more environmental type of data as well. So this is an example of kind of a merging or a relationship between wildfire hazard potential and median home value. So we use that relationship smart mapping style to look at this data. And if we zoom in here around San Francisco, we see some interesting trends about really high value homes, but low wildfire potential. But immediately around that in the ring is high home values, but also a high wildfire potential. So you can see the different categories over here that we can explore within this public policy set of maps. So it could be everything from social equity and health to transportation and infrastructure to those environmental layers as well. And we can put these maps into what we call collections. So you can see the three that I've walked through here in my collection. And of course, I can mark them as favorites, again, to keep quick access to. And I can share this collection with other users as well. All right, so we've talked about the sort of web-based view of the Living Atlas. A lot of you said that you access that through Pro, so that's great. Hopefully you've already figured this out, but for people that are unaware, you can also access these layers through the Pro interface. So one of the ways that you can do that is through the catalog pane. By default, when you open this, you'll be looking at your project folders. But if you go to the portal tab, so based on how you're signed in, if you're signed into ArcGIS Online, you'll see, you know, your content, your organization's content, et cetera, and then you'll also have Living Atlas content. If you're signed into Enterprise, we'll talk about that a little, just a couple minutes, but you will also have access to Living Atlas content through here as well if your administrator has configured it. So here's that Living Atlas repository, and I can just use the filter button and get to those same categories that I want to filter by. So for example, if I want to bring in some sort of soils type of data, I could do that and grab something like geology units. So that's one way to add data to the map. The other way, if you're a fan of just going to the Add Data button, you can absolutely do that as well. And you'll have that same portal option over here on the left with the Living Atlas and the same filtering capabilities as we've seen everywhere else. So I'd like to give you multiple ways to do that. Okay. All right, so I've mentioned a couple times about ArcGIS Enterprise. We know a lot of people in the national government space are using ArcGIS Enterprise, maybe in conjunction with ArcGIS Online. So if you weren't aware, you can configure your ArcGIS Enterprise instance to consume Living Atlas content. It's basically referencing that content from online. It's not the entire catalog, it's about 1,400 items. These are, you know, chosen basically based on popularity and stability, among other things. They do come along with the installation for ArcGIS Enterprise, so we're also trying to keep that installation size small. Internet access is required to access them, obviously, since you're reaching outside to the open internet. And you can configure, you know, just the default level, or you can add on the subscriber and premium content as well that requires your credentials to ArcGIS Online. Once you've configured it in your enterprise portal, you can access it through, again, through the portal interface itself or ArcGIS Pro. And an administrator can choose to disable this content if they need to at some point. So I wanted to walk through what that looks like just a little bit. Go back to my browser. So here I'm signed in as an administrator to an enterprise instance. And right now I'm just on the main organization page. If I go to settings, you'll see a category over on the left called ArcGIS Online. And so first it's asking me if I want to configure utility services. So again, to be able to power a lot of those analysis services within the portal, you can optionally turn them on here to, again, be configured against a set of ArcGIS Online credentials so that you can access these analysis services and provide those tools to your users. And then scrolling down, you can also configure the Living Atlas content here. So this first toggle will be on by default. And all that does is bring in any of that public content that doesn't require an ArcGIS Online subscription. So the things like the Basemaps and some of that, you know, completely public content. Then you can, as an administrator, optionally toggle on the subscriber or premium content bundles as well, and you'll be prompted to enter your ArcGIS Online credentials that it can pass to the web to pull in those services. All right, and once you've done that, I've already done that for this org, so if I go back to my content, that content will be available to all of your portal users, right? Those utility services, they get added under my ArcGIS Online login, or under my enterprise login. So these are all those services that were configured there. And this is my ArcGIS Online username. And the Living Atlas content itself, so all the data layers, same as online, you can go to that tab here on the content page. Those will be owned within the portal by kind of a default username, Esri_Living Atlas. So you won't see the, you know, original owner name from ArcGIS Online within the portal. They're all configured with this username. But any of your portal users can now come and browse through these items. And just like an online, you can filter them through by category and region, et cetera. And so whenever these, whenever you upgrade your portal, the Living Atlas content will upgrade as well. So we'll have kind of a new drop of data that gets configured within the portal. And the maps that you might be using, you know, be sure to update any mature layers that have been sort of deprecated, and you want to use the latest information as well. Alrighty, go back to the slides. So one last note on enterprise. We understand some people, unfortunately, can't reach out to the open internet to take advantage of all that content. We do provide some Esri boundary layers that you can download and then publish to your own enterprise. So it's about 125 layers with those kind of standard admin areas with the basic demographic information, and again, are optimized for analysis. This might be useful if you've deployed ArcGIS Insights in your portal. Oftentimes, if you bring in data, it needs to be mapped to those administrative boundaries. This is a way that you have access to those for your Insights users. But because you're publishing them on your own environment, you can be completely disconnected. To publish this, you basically, as an administrator, need to download the service definitions from my Esri. They'll just be service definition files that come with an admin command line tool that's available with Portal, and use that command line tool to publish those service definitions to stand up those hosted boundary layers within your portal. So just want to make sure everyone's aware of that option. All right, we want to talk about contributing to the Living Atlas next. I think we're going to do our second poll. So we want to know if your organization manages any authoritative content that's either already in the Living Atlas or you might consider nominating to it. Alrighty, looks like got our results here. So almost 40% of you said that yes, your organization has contributed something. So that's great to hear. For the rest of you, hopefully we're starting to inspire you to contribute your content, and we'll talk a little bit more about that process here. Okay, so what can you share to the Living Atlas? So as you've seen us walking through, touring around this content, we've seen layers. There's also web maps. So if it's a visualization of a layer that you want to share, as well as applications and story maps. So obviously we've seen those custom apps that have been built. But some other things that you may not think of are even 3D scenes and rule packages, as well as tables of data. And even a newer category, we've started contributing some deep learning packages, so broadening into even machine learning related content. So there's a wide variety of things that can be contributed. Why would you want to share? Well, you can reach a wider audience, right? If you want to make sure that your data is usable, reach a wider audience. Make it more discoverable. So as we've seen, there's plenty of different ways that people can find this content, different ways they can filter through it. This will make it that much more discoverable. And the GIS analysts and just general GIS community is able to use the data directly from the source. And, that can help people, build trust and, build up your authority as that data holder. What's the process for contributing this content? Well, first you have to nominate it, right? Esri doesn't know that you have it, so you need to nominate it to us. And then we have a set of curators on our Living Atlas team. They will review that content. If you've done a really great job, it could be accepted right away, but more than likely there'll be a bit of a back and forth while they review it with you. They'll, help provide some tips and tricks and best practices to make sure that it's ready to go and kind of meets the standards that the community now expects from this content. So it likely is an iterative process, and then eventually it'll be accepted and added to that repository. So I'll show you a little bit what that nominating process looks like. All right, we're going to go back to the Living Atlas website. So we've talked about home and browse and apps and blog. The other places that we haven't talked about yet is contributing. So this first tab, contribute, really just talks about the different ways to contribute, what I've already started talking about. But on the My Contributions page, which again, you'll see once you're signed in, this is where you can actually nominate your content. So it did a search of all of my content. You see I have a lot of items, and they have flagged about 45 of them that might be eligible for me to contribute. So I can go through here and start to, see if there's something that I want to nominate. I'm going to look for a particular web map that I've started working on. Alrighty, so I've got this web map here that I've built, and this is based on some data that came out not too long ago from the Small Business Administration on loans that they gave out under the Paycheck Protection Program that was part of the COVID stimulus, COVID relief program. And so they had, data on all the businesses all the small businesses that they gave loans to, and what industry they were in, and how many jobs they were expecting to retain with that loan. And so I just did some aggregation of that data to the county level, and did a predominance map of the industries and by the number of jobs retained. So if this is something that I want to contribute to the Living Atlas, you can see this is flagging for me, what I might want to improve about this item. And you can see there's some ones that I've just got warnings by down here. So I've kind of started some of these, but they could be improved. But then there's, something flagged here in red that's definitely missing that I absolutely have to have before I can nominate it. And I also want to point out the scoring over here. Right now, this is getting 77 out of 100 points, and I need 80 points to be able to nominate it, which is why this button is grayed out right now. So I need to put in some sort of summary, and so we try to make that easy for people to do here to make some of these improvements right here within this interface. So I'm going to go ahead and edit that summary field, and I just have a little bit of text I can paste in. I'll hit save. So now that I've made that improvement, it's bumped up my score to 85 points. So now I would be able to nominate this. It doesn't mean it's going to be accepted right away, but at least I can, put it in the queue and have someone start reviewing it and work with them to improve it even more, right? So it can be that easy to go ahead and nominate some of your content. Alrighty, so what are our curators looking for? Mostly, is your item understandable and ready to be used by others? Is there documentation on that details page of, what this data is and where it came from and who owns it? Does it perform well? If you're hosting it on your own infrastructure, is that performing well enough? If you've published it to ArcGIS Online, we know it can be scalable there, but there's still some performance improvements that might be able to be made. Is delete protection enabled? We definitely don't want people deleting content that's in the Living Atlas by accident, so make sure that's turned on. Do you have a good user profile? So the owner of that item, is their profile filled out? What organization are they with? Does that organization itself have a profile? And for layers specifically, we want to know if these are good building blocks, right, for other people to build maps off of. Are your field names configured with good aliases so that they're understandable rather than just being abbreviations and underscores, right? Do you have default pop-ups configured? And is your symbology well crafted? Again, as a default, people can obviously change that in their own visualizations, but it's good to at least put a default symbology that's meaningful on the layer. And so what do our curators see? So this is an example of a feature service. So you can see they, get the basic details about it, the categories, they can assign it to different categories. And as we said, it might cross over different categories. And they, can open that feature service within a map viewer. And then mark kind of what stage it's in, if it's under review or pending, or if it's been accepted. That can be marked. For a web mapping application, is another type of content that can be submitted. Same sort of story. Obviously, instead of viewing in the map viewer, they would just view the application. This is where they kind of do all their moving things through the process of getting into the Living Atlas. So we wanted to talk about some considerations and options when you're nominating things from your organization. Rather than it being an individual user, if you can create a dedicated publishing account, something that is headless, right, that represents, your organization, not as a individual person. So for example, in the screenshot, the City of Albuquerque GIS department, right? Make sure you've got a good thumbnail with your organizational branding on it. And make use of, a terms of use space to put in boilerplate text on your items, right? So if you've got boilerplate legal text that needs to go along with your data, that's a place where you can add it. One other thing that you might consider is becoming a verified organization. So this is a process that your administrator in your org would do that basically notifies Esri that you want to be verified. We go through that verification process. Once we verify that your organization is who you say it is, we make a change on the back end that allows your administrator to mark content as authoritative. So that's where that authoritative flag that we've seen under some of these items, that's where that comes from. So once you're a verified organization, you can mark things as authoritative. And once you've done that, the username that appears next to each item will be your organizational name, no matter who actually owns the item. it's swapped out for your organizational name. So anyone in your org could own it, but if you've marked it authoritative, it gets your sort of organizational branding on it. So that's another option to consider. All right, so beyond contributing your data as items to the Living Atlas, you can also contribute to that Community Maps program. So as we mentioned with our Basemaps, we have, national, provincial, and local sources contributing to this. And that includes the imagery map, street map, topographic map, and the ocean base map. And so typically people are submitting things like administrative boundaries, building footprints, water bodies, land use layers, areas and points of interest, even things like trees. So cities that have gone out and done, marked all their tree locations, they'll submit those as well. So it really helps enhance those base maps for the larger GIS community. And we include an editor app that you can use to edit specific features. So even if it's not a entire data set that you're putting into the base maps, if you just need to modify a specific feature, we have an editor app to do that as well. But on that contribute tab of the Living Atlas website, that's where you can kick off the process of applying to be in the Community Maps program. And we'll walk you through the steps to get your data ready to be put into these base maps. Alrighty. All right, so that concludes the content that we wanted to walk through today. We wanted to leave you with a few resources. First off, if you didn't catch it before, really important website to remember is that livingatlas.arcgis.com website. So again, that's a great starting point for getting familiar with this content and exploring all those great apps and hopefully considering nominating some of your content into the Living Atlas. And I also wanted to flag a couple blogs for some of the things that we've talked about. So the checklist for nominating your maps and apps to Living Atlas, there's a nice blog article about that. And as we mentioned, the raster basemap services moving into mature support. To get some more details on that, there's a blog there as well. And then finally, enterprise. For enterprise users, if you want to, pass along to your administrators, or if you are an administrator, how to configure that content into your enterprise. You can go to the enterprise documentation under the administrator section, configure the portal website, and then configure Living Atlas content, and we'll walk you through those steps. And I think we've put those into the chat as well. You can grab a screenshot of this slide, or you can grab the URLs from the chat. So with that, we want to thank everyone for attending today, and we're happy to take any questions.
All right, Bonnie, we thank you for that. That was excellent. Our first question is from Kirk Cover. It says ArcGIS Online has a health dashboard at status.arcgis.com. Is there any plans to have a similar dashboard for Living Atlas data, as many users rely on Living Atlas data for up-to-date situational events?
Sure, that's a great question. I don't know. I haven't heard anything coming out of the product team on that, but we can certainly ask and follow up with you. That's a great suggestion, though.
All righty. The next one is, there are many Living Atlas layers that contain world data where users may only be interested in state or country data. Can the Living Data team add additional fields such as country and state? This would allow filters to be more quickly applied for regional specific maps and apps.
Okay, so regions right now just lets you filter down to the country level, but sounds like you're interested in going more specific than that. Yeah, we can definitely take that as feedback for the team. Yeah, happy to pass that along.
All righty, and next one, how does one go about requesting corrections to errors in metadata? How does one request additional fields in a data layer?
Probably the best thing to do would be to turn on comments, or add a comment to the item. The owner should see that and be able to respond. I know I've definitely seen comment traffic to that effect on a lot of those Living Atlas layers and layers in general in ArcGIS Online. Yeah, if it is a Esri specific layer, I mean, I know you can, if you go to the owner, the owner's name and you click on their profile, hopefully they've included a contact email. You're always welcome to email that alias or that user's email as well. But those are the two methods I would use, is either commenting or just emailing whatever link is in the profile.
Okay, next question. Are there any vector-based maps that can be used for offline? For example, in a collector app.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So there's a set of vector-based map tiles that are available for you to take offline. I believe they're in a specific group within ArcGIS Online. So you might try searching offline vector-based maps and see if you can find a group that has those specific layers in it.
Excellent. Next question. When you are signed into ArcGIS Online, you can create maps without the need for an ArcGIS software, right? I don't have an actual access to an actual ArcGIS software license.
Sorry, can you repeat that one?
Sure, no problem. When you're signed into ArcGIS Online, you're able to make maps without the need for having a piece of desktop ArcGIS software, correct?
Right. Okay, got it. Yeah. Yes, correct. Yep, so that map viewer that I showed when I was putting in I added the tornadoes data to, that's just within the browser, within ArcGIS Online, and I can save out a web map and share it, in a number of different ways, and it doesn't require any sort of desktop software.
Okay. Next, you mentioned the high field data. Does that include any layers like parcels?
I don't believe so. I don't think parcels is one of the data sets that they maintain, but you're welcome to go to the website and double check. I haven't seen it there. I think, yeah, I haven't seen that particular one in the data set, but it may be added in the future. I do know that is coming directly from the DHS owned account, so it's not Esri maintaining those layers. So I'm not sure if they've contributed parcels or not at this point.
Excellent. That concludes our questions. Thank you everyone for coming. Really appreciate you being here and hope you have a wonderful day.